As Chris said, we're beginning a series on the vision statement that the church adopted in July by the Administrative Council. So the vision statement is, we are a community of servants called by God's reconciling grace to open doors of sanctuary, to create new avenues of ministry, to equip Christians for discipleship, and to lead reconciling ministries. See, it can be memorized. You can call it forth. Okay, so this week, I want to say one thing about the vision statement. Colleen, and I think this is a great analogy, said a vision statement is like a coloring book. It gives you the outline of what you want to color, but then it's up to you, the church, to fill in where you want to, what colors you want in the picture. So the vision statement is our outline, and then how we express that we are a community of servants, or how we create new avenues of ministry, that's up for us to decide what colors we want to put in there. So this week is we are a community of servants. Next week will be called by God's reconciling grace. This week is we are a community of servants, which is the who. Next week is the why, and the following weeks are what, the what. We are a community of servants. I'm going to take it backwards. So the first thing I'm going to talk about are servants, then community, then we. Servants, servants are those who serve. When we think of servants, we tend to think of maybe unskilled, lower paid, less educated persons. When I was in college, it was always a scramble to get a college job, a summer job. It was important to get a summer job because that's how I paid my room and board during the year. And it was always hard to get one because I lived up in New Hampshire, went to school there, and came back to Dayton, and it was hard to connect. My dad wrote me a letter, one April, and he said, I've got a job for you. Don't worry, I've got a summer job for you. Great. Way to go, Dad. What a dad, Got home, and he said, I got this job for you with the city of Dayton, cleaning the toilets in the public parks. Yes, Dad, way to go. That's what I was looking forward to. Those jobs that Dad got me made me realize how much I wanted to go back to college and not be a servant. Now, servants, servants are indispensable. We might think of the person who cleans the bedpans as a servant, but they're indispensable. The person who picks up the trash is indispensable. The police are often called servants. They're indispensable. There are a lot of people that we would have lots of trouble living if it weren't for what we call servants. Now, the servant that we usually come across most often is the server in a restaurant. And what are the marks of a good server? What are when we have a good server, what are we looking for, and why do we tip well that server? They begin by saying, hi, my name is Chris, and I'm your server for today. We look for them to be attentive to our needs, to pay attention to us, to be prompt and on the ball, to be quick with grace, to meet our needs, to listen to us, in that sense, to be obedient to us. We expect them to be humble and to focus on us and not themselves. A bad servant is one who is self-absorbed, who is rude, who is arrogant, who just doesn't pay any attention to us. Now, servants, Susan's witness was about her and Bob as servants. They actually served those third graders. While we're on the topic of teachers in school, Susan's grandparents were all immigrants from Ukraine. Susan's grandmothers never became United States citizens. Boy, think of the turmoil they'd be in now. And they spoke Ukrainian in their home. They went to a Ukrainian church. They lived in a Ukrainian neighborhood. Susan's father and his twin brother were not brought up speaking English. They were brought up speaking Ukrainian. And they started kindergarten a year late because Susan's grandmother, not being acculturated to American society, didn't know to send them to kindergarten. So they started late. And they started kindergarten in the Buffalo school system speaking Ukrainian. And they got beat up a lot because of that. Their teacher noticed that. And for that year, she stayed after school with Susan's father and uncle, teaching them English. So they would succeed in school and they wouldn't get beat up. That is a servant, So we are a community of servants. We can express that service in a lot of ways. One way I want to say we can express our service is just like that server in the restaurant says, "Hi, my name is Chris, and I'm your server for tonight." When people come in our building, they come in as strangers. They might come in not connected. They might come in not knowing what to expect. How wonderful it would be if each of us said to someone, "Hi, I'm Chris. Hi, I'm Bob. Hi, I'm Linda. May I help you? I'm glad you're here." It doesn't take a lot. That would be great service to make people feel welcome. Yesterday, we ended up going 3 times to Ohio Stadium. The first time was at 6:30 in the morning because we had to see where game day would be to get the lay of the land. Then we went back at 11:30 to see game day in person on the Oval. Then we went back at 6 o'clock to soak in the ambience of the crowd and really to look for free giveaways around St. John Arena. Sugardale hot dogs came through. Now, with each one of those trips, every time I saw an Oklahoma fan, I said, "Hi, welcome to Columbus." I must have said it 100 times. "Hi, welcome to Columbus." Every time I saw that OU. And I thought, I'm going to let them have a good experience of Columbus. I'm going to be a servant. So one of those times we were walking back to our house. We were by the library and passed some OU fans. And, "Hi, welcome to Columbus." Then we saw this young woman that had on a Harvard t-shirt walking toward us. And I froze. And I didn't say anything. And Susan said, "Why didn't you welcome that young woman from Harvard?" And I said, "I got to draw the line somewhere." Colleen will explain that joke later. Okay. So we are a community of servants, and it can be as easy as, "Hi, I'm Chris. I'm your server for today." We are a community of servants. Community, geographical location, and just gathering in a space by itself doesn't make for a community. It just makes for a collection of people. There are prisons, there are dormitories, there are apartment complexes where people live together, but that does not necessarily make them a community. A community has shared goal, shared vision, shared understanding. It has a central focus. A community is made up of diversity. Not everyone is the same. And in diversity, there's a trust, there's a respect, there's a sense of truthfulness, and there's a respect in the sense of welcoming other ideas. So sometimes what we think is a community really isn't. If everybody's just thinking alike and everybody's acting alike, a community has diversity. When St. Benedict was setting up the rules for his monasteries in the 500s, he has this line where he says, "It's easier to travel than to stop." And what he was saying what he meant by that is, when we're traveling and we're not connected to other people, we can be who we are, we can say what we want, we can act the way we want. We're not held accountable and we're not responsible to any group of people. But when we stop, we're with a group of people, and then it becomes a matter of respecting and paying attention to and sharing and telling the truth and caring and being transformed and being changed and growing. It's easier to travel than it is to stop. And I know that's true for my life. It's when I stop and become part of a group of people that have a common goal and common values. That's when I grow. That's when I'm challenged. That's when I change. That's a community. When I think about healthy communities, they have the same attributes of servants. In a healthy community, you have listening, you have obedience, you have humility, you have paying attention to the other person, you have putting the other person first. Communities work when you have that patience and that mutual understanding and that mutual respect. Communities don't work when you have a bunch of bad servants, when you have that arrogance and that self-absorption and that lack of respect. A healthy community is made up of servants. So it's almost redundant to say a community of servants. In a sense, you don't have a community if you don't have servants. So who are we as a community of servants to serve? Well, when we wrote that vision statement initially, I thought it began with serving people outside the church, like people at Hubbard School or at New Life or NEMAP. But I realize we are a community of servants that begin with service to each other. We care about each other. We support each other. We challenge each other. We respect each other. And that those qualities then are practiced here and then spill over to the real world. So when we say, "Hi, I'm Chris, I'm your server," here, then it spills over out into the real world. Some of you have heard this. It's an old illustration. I think it's Buddhist. It might be Hindu. Of a vision of hell and a vision of heaven. And the vision of hell is a long dinner table that's filled with all kinds of wonderful food. And everybody is seated around the dinner table. but their arms are 3 feet long and their elbows don't bend. And so they can't get the food to their mouth. And so the vision of hell is all these people sitting around this wonderful meal, not being able to eat it, and they starve. That's hell. That's a lack of community. Heaven is the same scene. Same people, same arms that don't bend, same amount of food all over the table. But in heaven, they're picking up the food and feeding the person across the table from them. So everybody eats well. That's community. We are a community of servants. So now we. There's a difference between saying I and we. There's a difference between saying my and ours. John Steinbeck in Grace Arras says it's the most revolutionary idea in human history to move from saying I to we. It changes totally how we see the world. I'll tell you one thing that really annoys me in churches is when people say things like, they're in the church and they say, when do you have worship? Why don't those people do this? And I think, those people are you. You know, when do we have worship? Not that when do you have worship? And I think when we talk that way, it's like in the prodigal son. In the prodigal son story, that older brother keeps talking about your son, that son of yours. He will not acknowledge that they're a family. And often in a church, we don't talk in terms of we. We talk in terms of them and you and those people. It's a world of difference when we talk about we. The primary difference is when we say we acknowledge that we belong. We're part of the church. We're part of the community. When we say we belong, we're accountable to each other, we support each other, we cry with those who cry, we rejoice with those who rejoice. It's just a total difference to say we. In that passage from Ephesians at the end, Paul talks about the body functioning together. When we have one Lord, one vision, when we have that servant attitude of patience and understanding and humility, we become one body with different gifts, but we all serve each other with our unique gift. And then he says we become one body knit together, moving together. One translation talks about it as a dance. You know, we move rhythmically together in love, and we are graceful in love. I love that. We move rhythmically together, and we are graceful in love. That's a community of servants that we are part of. Back when our girls, and I can't remember which daughter it was in ballet, Susan and I went to a recital that it was at the end of a 2-week ballet camp up in Flint, Michigan. And these kids, they came from all over the country, and there were probably 100 kids, did a recital at the end, and every child was involved in it. They all had a part. You know, some had bigger parts, some had lesser parts. You know, some were jumping and leaping and spinning and all that kind of stuff. And it was really good. And it really came together. And toward the end of the dance, Susan leaned over to me and said, "This is just beautiful. The choreographer did a great job. And the kids listened to the choreographer. And I thought, I never saw the choreographer. I don't know who the choreographer is. I just saw the community of servants dancing together, sharing their gifts. But there was a choreographer who gave them the vision, who made it all work. But we never see the choreographer. But we know if the choreographer is good by the dance. And I thought, now, in this sermon, I have not mentioned God once. It's just we are a community of servants, and we don't start the statement by mentioning God. We don't mention the choreographer. But we know there is a choreographer. And when we really dance together as a community of servants, people will say, the choreographer is doing a wonderful job with that group of dancers because they're doing a beautiful dance. And we as a community of servants then point to the choreographer that no one can see, but we make that choreographer very real in the world by our community of service. May it be so. Amen.